My brain just...
Mushy mush mush. We did another episode, and it's smaller and different than our usual episode, and this is a different day, and it's not Tuesday, but this is special because there's so much content, and we love sports, and we love football, and so we're going to talk about football things today because we talked about the Olympics for a really long time, but we have to talk about football because when are we not going to talk about football? So happy Friday, everyone. Here is football.
Hey, you know what? I think that's the playbook for this week.
Recording from New York and Los Angeles, your hosts, Nicole Katz and Briana Klein, are emerging from the tunnel for this week's show. Another sports show is ready to broadcast to you on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Make us one of your stars of the game by subscribing, liking the video, and turning on auto downloads. Before we kick off, please leave us a podcast review and YouTube comment. Attend the postgame on social media for exclusive daily content. Today on another sports show.
Here, really quickly so I can put the graphic up on the screen. If you haven't watched on Tuesday, as Nicole said, we did a massive episode about everything Olympics. That being said, we didn't want to not talk about football, as she said. So we're going to do Broad Street versus Broadway. Can you win with tension between a head coach and a quarterback? And I panic because the Eagles are mentioned in the same sentence as the Jets. But we talk about both situations this week. And then our NFL preview of the week is the NFC South. And, Bucs, Saints, Falcons, Panthers. You probably forgot what happened last season because we did. So we go through what happened last season and what to expect this season. Basically, if Atlanta doesn't win this division, something goes very, very, very wrong. We've been recording for a long time today.
It's another sports show, but it's not Broad Street versus Broadway. But is it really a debate? Because voiceover man is Team Broad Street, and that makes the vote 2-1 on this show. Let's go, birds.
I hate the words that are about to come out of my mouth right now. Because normally, if I can put the Philadelphia Eagles in the same sentence as the New York Jets, it's not good for the Eagles. But I guess interestingly for people listening, both of these teams right now, your favorite team, grumpily, I think you've rejected them mostly, but historically your team is the Jets. Mine is the Eagles, and they're both have interesting coach versus quarterback dynamics. So I thought it would be a great conversation to have heading into the season. Can you win with tension between a head coach and quarterback, who are arguably the two most important figures on a team, but the NFL is a big team sport. So I figured we would talk about both, and then maybe come to some conclusion at the end about how we're feeling about both of the teams and answering that question of, do we think our teams can actually win this year despite tension between the head coach and quarterback? And I normally do lots of propaganda on this show for the Philadelphia Eagles fan, so I think we should start with the Jets because I will talk too long about the Eagles, and we should make sure we talk about the Jets. So the Jets situation is Aaron Rodgers is very much Aaron Rodgers. I will not get into that anymore. But it seems to be the beginning of this. When Aaron Rodgers signed with the Jets, him and Robert Saleh and the whole Jets organization at the beginning of last year, it was like honeymoon phase, lovey-dovey. This man might now play more than 8 seconds for the team. And wow, things seem to be a disaster this year. Aaron Rodgers went on vacation to Egypt instead of going to mandatory minicamp. Robert Saleh said that it was an unexcused absence, which... yeah, I don't know how you respond to that any other way, because even if the Jets organization was okay with him missing, it's mandatory minicamp and he's on vacation. I don't know. And now, since then, we've gotten quotes about Robert Saleh, like sitting Rodgers during the preseason game and Rodgers being upset about that. It seems like these two aren't talking a lot behind the scenes, and instead they're using the press, which is very Aaron Rodgers, like this seems to be his MO, yada, yada, yada. So with this one, since this is brewing and we're seeing lots of smoke, my question to you, Nicole, as the Jets fan, how much fire do you think there is actually behind all this smoke right now?
So you bring up the really good point, which I needed to start with, of the Aaron Rodgers of it all. I think there's like a certain way that he works and the communicating through the press and like, okay, maybe as your quarterback, it's almost impossible unless you're purposefully doing it to not be interacting with your head coach, to not be communicating with your head coach. Like I find that so difficult to understand how that is something that is possible. And it seems very clear because, yes, Aaron Rodgers does play that game in the press of like what he was told and what he wasn't told. And it's like, what do you mean that like no one told you that you weren't playing the 2 first preseason games and you found out from the press? Like, I think there is fire. I think there will be fire wherever Aaron Rodgers is, to be very honest. I think the interesting point of this is I fall in the place of if Aaron Rodgers is not successful, coach got no job. Coach go bye-bye. And it seems like not that he would be wanting to make more of an effort to like get Aaron Rodgers to work and like, okay, maybe if it's raining and you're like, oh, these conditions, like we want to not play him. I'm like, well, don't you need your quarter? Aaron Rodgers is going to have to play in the rain. He's going to have to play in the rain on turf again. Like there is so clearly other issues underlying of this. And it definitely doesn't seem like a good dynamic moving forward. It seems very opposite of where everything was last year. So I don't feel good as a Jets fan.
You made such an interesting point about how if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play well, the person who gets fired is Robert Saleh. So he has the most vested interest in making this work, which makes me think that he is working his butt off behind the scenes to make it work. And this is just, I think maybe I'm thinking the best of people, and people are self-interested. So I do think Robert Saleh is working very hard behind the scenes to try to put out this fire and is not trying to work through the press. And Aaron Rodgers is just being Aaron Rodgers.
And working through the press. But
being dramatic.
I enjoy like Robert Saleh as a coach and as a person, and I want him to be successful, and it would be very heartbreaking for me to see him go somewhere else, but also like that's what the answer can be. Yeah, it does seem like there's some like Aaron Rodgers is toying around. At least how I'm understanding of it.
I try not to put my brain in the mindset of Aaron Rodgers often. It sounds like an unpleasant place to be.
Sounds terrifying and scary.
But I do think this is Aaron Rodgers not understanding New York media. Like Green Bay media and New York media are different animals entirely. And when he missed mandatory minicamp, all of the headlines, right on the New York Post, everything was all anti-Aaron Rodgers. It wasn't, and I do believe this is the first time that he's really going to have a media corps that is so quick to turn on the player and not the organization. So yeah, I don't foresee this getting better unless they go like 8-0 or something. Like, okay, so like let me put you in this situation. The team is 5-3 after their first 8 games. That's a decent record in the NFL. Do you think this is getting better, or do they have to be like, or do they have to be unbelievably good and dominant for this to all go away?
I almost feel like they need to have the unbelievable dominance. I feel like it needs to like be the full opposite of last year. Like an Aaron Rodgers needs to come out in the way that everyone quote unquote expected him to, and for it to work like everyone expected it to, for this to like be okay. So I'm not going into this necessarily optimistic. But again, I've been pretty down on the Jets entirely. To good point though on I do think this is Aaron Rodgers' like first take of in a place where the fan media will turn on the player before the organization. And then also,
which, by the way, I don't think is right. I just understand the reality of
that's how
press.
It functions. Right. Yeah. And then, he shows up to day 1 of training camp, like wearing a shirt clearly from Egypt. And everyone's like, are you so serious? Like it's bad taste in my mouth all around. Does not feel good. Does not feel great. It's also just like Aaron Rodgers, you didn't do anything. You did absolutely nothing. Why are you walking around right now at the Jets organization like you are the saving grace when you played for 8 seconds and then was injured? Like, you still have so much to prove for the Jets organization. Like, we're not talking about Green Bay right now. We're talking about you at the Jets. But so that's not the only QB drama going on. This isn't necessarily a new story, as it seems like from the Eagles. This had started brewing a little bit last year about some drama with Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. And it seems like either people are too lazy at coming up with new stories and it's easy to just keep it going, or it is real and happening. So where are you feeling right now in terms of your QB coach relationship? Should there be concern? Is there fire in Philadelphia?
I don't know. The Okay, so Tim McManus of ESPN, who's an incredible reporter, put out what many people are referring to as the like conclusive, like sourced from every side possible story on what happened with Jalen and Nick's relationship last year. Every other article that has come out, I have very much felt I could read the article and understand what camp the POV is coming from. Impressively, Tim McManus, I shouldn't say this is, like, I want to be clear, it's impressive but not surprising because Tim McManus is Tim McManus and this is the type of reporter he is. Like, this is clearly very well sourced from every angle. Talking about last year how Jalen went rogue in the offense. Jalen and Nick couldn't meet one-on-one because they were so mad at each other. And when I say Jalen went rogue, like, play calls were coming in and he just was doing his own thing. And Nick took more control over the offense instead of giving first-time offensive coordinator and play caller Brian Johnson enough leeway to do it. There's also the interesting background dynamics that Brian Johnson is like incredibly close with the Hurts family. So much so that Jalen Hurts' dad coached Brian Johnson and gave him his starting coaching. So it became, according to this reporting, but I think at this point it's kind of been distilled down, it became a very much like a Jalen and Brian Johnson versus Nick Sirianni thing. And that's not going to work. Getting back to your question, I understand the timing of the article because Tim McManus wrote a really good article of like, what does this mean for this year? I have a decent amount of faith in the Philadelphia Eagles organization. And everyone was very surprised that Nick Sirianni came back this year. And in a sport where coaches are fired fast all the time. So I believe that Lurie and Howie, owner and GM, but the brass of the Eagles, would not have brought back Nick Sirianni if their $300 million quarterback refused to work for him ever again.
I think that's very true of like they have all of that investment, like that much investment in Jalen Hurts. Like that's going to be where, if there is an allegiance, I feel like that's going to be where you follow it. And then to your point of like you cut where like coaches, there's another one. So solid point of if that $300 million is not willing to be working with this disposable, technically, like position, probably willing to like make amends or work together in some way.
Yeah. It's also, there's so many like things like Jalen Hurts, his whole thing through his entire career is everyone said he's been this incredibly coachable QB. And Nick Sirianni is the relationship guy where it's like all about team and relationships. So like they should be able to work it out. This was a storyline that was the headline coming into training camp was like, is this going to work? What's their relationship going to be like? Because even before this Tim McManus reporting, everyone was well aware this is why it fell apart last season and why everything was awful. So the interesting thing is that the picture, the video, the moment of training camp so far this year is Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni hanging out side by side, driving around Big Dom's golf cart. So do these two, like my takeaway is if the season's going to work, they have to get along enough. And every indication, every answer to the press, like Eagles press, hounds these two on this all the time and have been even before this article. Their answers have been good. They've been seen together, working together. Every indication of people in the building now say it's fine. So I'm going to say that right now the fire has gone out and that we're rehashing last year. No, I think the caveat we can give to both of these conversations, though, is that like if they start losing, Nick Sirianni's getting fired. Like if they start losing, Robert Saleh's getting fired. But like, is that really about the relationship versus what you just said, which is like you have all this money invested in the quarterback, so of course you're gonna
bye coach, replace you with someone else.
So I would actually say that despite Tim McManus bringing all this up again with his well-reported article, I think we just have some embers left over. Maybe I'm being optimistic. Nicole, am I being optimistic?
As someone who's not being optimistic, I'll say yes. But I think I'm very much in a case of, I think you have slight more evidence pointing towards legitimate optimism than the Jets do internally. but that's not saying much with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, we're literally talking. You could not have two quarterback personalities that are like more opposite of each other with how they interact with the public and or people.
Just people in general. I do think the interesting thing is, even though these, like, we can use the same headline for both of these topics, like, can you win with tension between the head coach and quarterback? I do think there's a clear difference between tension that's starting versus tension that has been happening. If it all implodes, by the way, like, I will be, like, the people I'll be mad at are Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, who are the people who decided to keep Nick on.
Yeah,
like, if this was all this bad.
Yeah,
like, so it's a little, this, poor Nick Sirianni's in a lose-lose situation here.
Coaches
because
are usually in lose-lose situations.
Yeah. So if everything's bad, he's getting fired, right? If the offense with this much talent gets better, though, it's not because of him, it's because they brought in Kellen Moore.
Mm-hmm.
Poor dude.
He doesn't get, there's no credit. It's just don't cause animosity, even though if he's not trying to on purpose.
That's the thing. You know what? I just said the difference is, one of the key differences is the Jets is starting, the Eagles is an ongoing story. I would say the other difference is, in the Eagles situation, I feel like I can confidently say Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts are both good people and, like, not trying to make things worse. And I don't have that feeling about Aaron Rodgers.
Nope. I also do not.
We just did a whole segment about how the Eagles and the Jets are the same.
That's gross.
I hate this. What flavor are you drinking?
Peach, which is, I guess this is the color of a peach, but at the same time, I still think it should be
the outside and not the inside.
Yeah.
I'm drinking raspberry peach.
Oh, I've been getting targeted ads for that. I want to buy that, but I need to finish my peach vibe so that I can then try raspberry peach.
You would like this one. This has been sitting in my fridge for a while, kind of as one that I'm like, I know that if I don't love it, it's probably a flavor you'll love, because normally we like different Celsius.
We like the opposites.
It's sweeter than I normally like.
Interesting, because I always feel like you like the really, like, sweet, juicy ones.
I like the lemon lime ones a lot, and there's like a guava lime one. I don't know. I like the ones that, like, don't taste like sugar for the most part.
More football. Preseason is becoming closer to not being the preseason and being the season and the things.
That was a funny way to phrase that.
Being the real season. I know. You can
I'm
tell
keeping that in.
It's so close to being the season and not the preseason, and it's not the postseason because now we're in the preseason. Blah, blah, blah. But we are previewing, and it's continuing. And today we are talking about the NFC South. So, my fun little spiel, I'm getting really good to say this, and while I nail it, we'll have to stop doing it now. As we were going through our NFL preview, we are basically going through every single division, and I am having Briana rank how she would feel in terms of nerves if a team were to be playing the Eagles today on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, oh my God, we are freaking out, unbelievably, anxiety is so high, and a 10, we're super cool, calm, and collected, and the Eagles will be totally fine. So
yes, and it would have made more sense if I flipped the numbers. I don't know why I asked to do it this way.
So this is the world that we're living in, and that's just, this is our scale, and no one can tell us that our scale is wrong. So
exactly.
So we're going with the NFC South, starting with the Tampa Bay Bucs. How are we feeling? Buccaneers, Eagles.
This is the weirdest division. This is a division where I could see any team that is not the Panthers winning the division. Most of the storylines of every single one of these teams are going to start to sound repetitive as we go through them. But I would say none of these teams have quarterbacks you can be confident in. Every single one of these teams, the offensive play caller is different. And whether it's the coordinator that changed, the head coach that changed. So there are so many question marks, which leads us to last year's Tampa Bay. Like, I don't know, Nicole, I'm going to ask you this question. Do you remember this division last year? How clearly do you remember it in your head?
I remember it basically as a cluster F. And what I remember is just honestly most out of this is just the Falcons being garbage. Like, that's so crazy of like, that's what my unbelievable takeaway from this is, like, oh wow, the Falcons have no fans in attendance and are bad. Like, that's the only thing I can really think about with
I mean, that's completely fair, because what I remember is Tampa Bay making the playoffs, and we all went, what, really? And the Falcons not ever giving Bijan Robinson the ball. And basically, this division was just like, someone has to make the playoffs, and so Tampa Bay did. And previewing for this year, someone has to make the playoffs. And I do have a take on who I think it's going to be. But let's first talk about Tampa Bay and start getting in these consistent trends. So I say this same spiel every time. Like, in order for consistency and comparison's sake, I'm going to talk about PFF's rankings of the offensive line and the defensive line and the quarterback. Doesn't mean the PFF is the end-all be-all rankings. It just gives us a comparison point for using the same rankings. Also, offensive defensive line, I think, is the core structure of if a team's going to be good. So let's talk Tampa Bay after all of that introductions. My bad. Whew. All right. PFF grades their offensive line number 17. I would summarize that they have a rookie at center and they have questions at guard. Their tackles are pretty good. But 17, right in the middle of the pack, which I would, I'm going to start saying things about Tampa Bay, which is everything is like, maybe, I don't know. All right.
We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's kind of the summary of Tampa Bay. Their defensive line is ranked 20, which is like, again, bottom middle of that pack. It's like, when you read everyone's assessment of both of these lines, it's like, probably not going to be great, probably not going to be awful, which is probably how you could describe Tampa Bay. And then their quarterback is Baker Mayfield, who, as a personality, I'm glad he signed a 3-year deal after having a good enough season last year. I think the sport is better when you have personalities like Baker Mayfield in it, but I don't think if he was my quarterback, I wouldn't be super confident going into this year. PFF ranks him 20, which feels really fair. Like, he's not a bottom third of the league quarterback, but he's not good.
Yeah, as someone, I think, who has been constantly in the place of, I just need a quarterback, and is currently sitting with Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if I would want Baker Mayfield. So, like, but it's fine. But agreed to the personality piece.
Well, here, if I'm going to convince you that Baker is going to be good, over his final 4 games, he was a top 10 in PFF's passing grade, including an impressive Week 15 performance on the road in Green Bay. Everyone's talking about how great Green Bay is and how great of an end of season Green Bay is. Well, they lost to Baker Mayfield. Oops, they lost to Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think the truth is Baker Mayfield is just going to be inconsistent. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he's one of those quarterbacks that's like, he doesn't have a high ceiling, but he, has a high floor for you. So I think Baker he's going to have weeks where he's great and he has weeks where he's not great.
It's going to be a good swing.
Right. You know what? If you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan and you can not be as emotional as I am as an Eagles fan, you'll probably have an entertaining season because it will not be consistent. That being said, I alluded that everyone has either a new coach, some change on offense. For Tampa Bay, they have a new offensive coordinator and play caller, Liam Cohen. He is coming straight from the Rams and the McVay tree. And I will tell you that that's also going to be a trend. So through all of this, I have 2 numbers for Tampa Bay. This is the first team that I will, and the only team I will give a true caveat through. Every other team I've made a decision about my stress levels as an Eagles fan. This one, I'm giving you 2 numbers. I do think they are 7. They are low on the stress scale. Unless, in the swinging pendulum of this, they end up facing the Eagles in the playoffs. Then they get a 4. Because for some reason, the Eagles can't beat this team in the playoffs. So if they are good enough to make the playoffs, they get a 4. But normally in the regular season, they're a 7. I have zero faith.
Totally normal reaction.
Team.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you for validating my feelings.
Circumstance is just totally going to change that. Moving on to our next NFC South team, New Orleans Saints. Headed on down to New Orleans. Oh boy, how is this different than every other team that we'll discuss?
Well, how this one's different is I wrote the least amount of notes in my research for this team. I don't understand how all of this is such a, like, all of this is, Atlanta should have won this division last year, but nope, Saints came in second. Offensive line,
how?
I know. Offensive line, PFF grades last in the league at 32. Defensive line is 24. Quarterback, Derek Carr, 21, right below Baker Mayfield. And let me just tell you, however you personally feel, whatever your gut reaction about Derek Carr is in your head, probably right. At this point, we know who he is. Like, there's nothing, I looked at this team for so long to find interesting things to say about them. I don't know. I think they're going to be bad, but also they're the Saints, so it wouldn't shock me if they're okay. Like, they're going to be that annoying team that would play the Eagles and, like, maybe upset them if the Eagles are, like, just off that day. Like, they're going to do that to, like, there's going to be some point in the middle of the season where they beat some team they're not supposed to beat, and everyone's going to be like, oh my God, the Saints, are they better than we expect? And the answer is probably going to be no.
My brain still, for some reason, just hears Derek Carr, and I can only see Raiders, so, like, it still breaks my brain of, like, Saints. Like, it's...
Derek Carr is that quintessential quarterback where you can tell by watching him that he's incredibly talented and he has that arm strength, but then he actually plays football on a football field and you're like, wow, this quarterback is awful. At least that's how I feel about Derek Carr. And it's just, at this point, I think that's just who he is. I think he has incredible physical gifts and can't actually play football very well.
Yeah, there's so much beautifulness on paper, but then for some reason, like, when it goes to, like, going fully in action, there's, like, some kind of, like, very interesting disconnect there. But, rough time in New Orleans, especially given PFF not feeling too hot at all. So,
well, I alluded, there's been an offensive change for every single one of these teams. The Saints did bring in a new offensive coordinator to try to crack the code and finally be the team that makes Derek Carr's talent work on the field. It's the 49ers passing game specialist from last year. So we now have the Shanahan tree. By the way, if you're, not in, like, inside NFL, like, everyone just hires from the Shanahan tree and the McVay tree.
Starting to sound like a Targaryen family tree, like it's Game of Thrones.
I need to give a number. Because of the overall feeling and that I couldn't even find anything interesting to write down except that they have a new offensive coordinator, they're getting an 8 from me.
Okay. I love you. We're so very hesitant on going to the 9s and still waiting on a 10
real
there,
bad.
But I know. Yeah, real bad.
Yeah, so far Denver's the only one who has a 9.
Which is fair. Oh boy. Going on to Atlanta Falcons. Oof. Big oof. Just an oof party. How, Kirk Cousins?
Michael Penix Jr.? Okay, despite the horribleness of their the headlines around their draft and offseason, if this team does not win this division, it is an embarrassment for everyone and everything involved. Their offensive line is ranked number 6 by PFF. Chris Lindstrom is the highest rated guard in the NFL for the second year in a row after last year. All 5 of their starting offensive linemen returned from last year to this year, which is incredible for consistency on a line. So if their now second-year guard, Bergeron, can take another step forward, they're just going to get better. Their center finished with the 3rd highest run blocking game among centers, which is also just hysterical about their whole thing last year, is that they wouldn't just run the ball to Bijan. They had this incredible offensive line even just last year, and they wouldn't just run the freaking ball.
They just wouldn't run the ball.
Right. Like, literally in my notes, I have in all caps, give Bijan the ball. So, top 10, number 6 in the league ranked offensive line. Turning your attention to the defensive line, PFF grades them 28. This team is going to live or die on whether or not their offense can score a lot of points. They paid Kirk Cousins to score a lot of points. They hired a new head coach, Raheem Morris, which I do have an interesting tidbit that I forgot about that you probably did too. So table that for a second. But Raheem Morris, they brought in because no one knew what they were doing on offense last year because they wouldn't give Bijan the ball. The talent on this offense is incredible. They should win this very bad division just based on that alone. Oh, and Kirk Cousins, straight in the middle of the league, number 15. Which, again, whatever you think of Kirk Cousins is probably who Kirk Cousins is. Like, he's maximized his money, did a great job. My AirPods are about to die. All right, I alluded to a tidbit here. So I completely forgot about this because it happened in 2020. Raheem Morris was at one point already the Atlanta Falcons head coach. October 12th, 2020, He was named the interim head coach of the Atlanta Falcons right after they parted ways with Dan Quinn. At that time, they had 11 games remaining of the 2020 season. They went 0-5 under Quinn and then 4-7 under Morris, who was temporary in charge. When I was reading this, I had a flashback to they fired Dan Quinn, and then it was like this big resurgence, and the players were actually happy again. And this was all happening in the muddledness of my brain in 2020. So of course I didn't remember this because I blocked out most of that year. And you all probably did too, which is why I
fully did too. Yes.
So they had this guy as their head coach and have spent the last 3 years just cycling through other coaching options to just go back to the interim head coach that they liked back then.
That's bananas.
Yeah. Last coaching point, they hired a new offensive coordinator, Robinson, who was the quarterback coach for the Rams last year, McVay tree. So all of this, the Atlanta Falcons, in my opinion, get a high 5 for me. I would be pretty stressed playing this team unless you're the Philadelphia Eagles playing them week 2 in prime time. And, they're probably lower then because Kirk Cousins, prime time, good time.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins, primetime, good time. I'm not, and maybe this is, 15 middle of the road is very interesting, but I almost am surprised. I don't want to say ranked as high, but coming off an Achilles tear like that, I'm almost surprised that he's not more middle, bottom, QB rankings. Yes, it's Kirk Cousins,
to me,
but
he's well below anyone you would consider a great quarterback. He's above the Carrs and the Baker Mayfields of the world, which I think is fair. But he's below the Jordan Loves of up and
the more
comers.
questionable younger talent than he's a questionable old-ish.
I think the injury point is incredibly important, and this is based on if he's not a shell of himself,
right?
Which
right.
Who knows? He totally these are preseason rankings, and I think PFF is pretty high on him being okay. Is the kind because 15 in the league, that is right.
Basically the middle, little just boop one above.
You would never if I was is Kirk Cousins a good quarterback? You would be I guess, yeah, it's fine. But at the same time, and I think we forget, especially because we're looking at these in chunks of divisions, how many teams don't have a quarterback or have a rookie quarterback, have a quarterback competition. Whereas at least Atlanta Falcons, you have a quarterback that you've seen play good quarterback.
No, but it makes sense because there are so many teams that will struggle of finding permanent quarterback, and it really messes up an entire team situation. So moving to the Carolina Panthers.
Poor Panthers. Everyone agreed, from when I talked to in real life, doesn't matter. I think there's general consensus that the Panthers are going to be the worst team in the sport. Yeah. And that's likely. But I'm going to make a case that, compared to everyone in the division that we've talked about except the Atlanta Falcons, when you put it all on paper, it really isn't that awful. Last year, they were historically bad. I think the argument I'm going to make is that I don't think they're going to be historically bad this year. Doesn't mean they won't be last in this division and maybe one of the worst teams in the league. But their offensive line is ranked 20th coming into this. And they paid an absurd amount of money.
It was going to be lower. I think I just am just expecting the worst.
Well, because last year, they were the worst offensive line in the league, bar none. So what they did in the offseason, they addressed no needs, except they paid absurd amount of money for every single possible offensive lineman that's on the market. So they took their worst in the league offensive line to what PFF predicts is going to be the 20th. And you know why they did that? Because poor Bryce Young spent how do you evaluate a rookie quarterback on whether or not they can be good if there is no one blocking? It's basically just let the ball through.
They might have just laid down. They literally might as well just been just go ahead, you can get him, go, he's over there.
So I believe that the Panthers made a very smart decision, spending too much money. Everyone's for roster construction, this isn't great. On getting every offensive line to get every offensive lineman they possibly can to at least try to figure out if Bryce Young can be a quarterback of an NFL team. Because no matter how way you slice it, it was the worst rookie season someone possibly could have had. And it seems like the Panthers are very much our fault, buddy. So sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's literally just in terms of the big spending and buying, like it's demonstrated exactly where it is. So it's easy right now to say definitely overspending, but if it comes through and it works, then they'll be like, it was worth it, fully worth it.
Right.
But will it?
And Bryce Young, PFF ranks 25th in the league, but they even admit, they're like, we can't rank him any higher because all the tape we saw was awful and it was the worst possible rookie season he could have had. But like, everyone's kind of looking at it like, pretty sure that's not his fault. So we'll see.
It's almost like rookie season 2.0 for Bryce Young this year.
Yeah. And of course, he doesn't, like, they didn't invest in any other part. So it's not like he's working with stellar people, but he might be able to actually make some throws that even if the player doesn't catch it. Him
some time.
Right. Even if the player doesn't catch it, he could make the throw and the team can evaluate whether or not Bryce Young could be good. Their defensive line is ranked 29th. So I was just very complimentary of the Panthers. The fact that the Panthers, every single player, they had star players. Do you remember this guy, Christian McCaffrey?
Like, I think I've heard of him before.
Yeah, if you look at the returns they got for trading away all their good players, which is, the strategy, you trade away these good players, you get draft assets, it's embarrassing. And one of the things that are embarrassing is that they trade away Brian Burns for nearly nothing. So this defensive line is decimated. Now some highlights, because I'm going to be positive, because, Carolina Panthers fans, if any of you are out there, I'm so sorry for the season you're about to have. Derek Brown, stellar in the run game. Can't rush the quarterback, but stellar in the run game. Clowney is a great defensive lineman when he is not the best player on your line, which unfortunately he is the best player on this line. PFF is quoted in their review of this is the reason they ended up 29th is that they are so low on young players on their defensive line that there was no realistic way they could spin it optimistically. Ooh. So like the chunk above them, like the 18 to 28, like it's like, hey, your proven commodities aren't great, but you have insert list of young players here where we could see something happening. They have so few young players that they just were like, I can't spin this positively for you.
You're all really old. You're going to be really tired. You're not going to be on the field for a long time. And then your offense is going to come out and they're going to get really tired. And then Bryce Young is going to get tackled.
Yeah. So this defense is going to be bad. But on the offensive side, I think they are going to be able to make a decision about Bryce Young, which is all you would want to ask for. All of this going together, they are still not the team that gets a 10. They get a 9.
That's fair. I think this is a well-deserved 9.
Right. I think also, like, the one for it being, like, easy going 10 is that, like, I do think that there's talent in Bryce Young, and he might have a game or two this season where that offensive line that is better keeps him upright and he can outscore someone. So, like, yeah, I'd feel a little stressed. But they joined Denver with my bottom of the pack, for sure.
We need a toilet bowl matchup of the two.
Yeah. If you want a recap of every single one of my rankings of stress levels so far, just head over to YouTube because I do have a bottom ticker going, just for anyone listening, of all the other teams so far.
It's time for the final buzzer.
Angel Reese's first full Reebok collection is here, and it's a beautiful, cohesive collection that's silver, blue, and all around incredibly cool, just like she is.
Lewis Hamilton continues to do one of the things that he does best, and no, I'm not talking about driving, even though he is the GOAT of that. I'm talking about being a fashion icon and part-time model with a latest photo shoot spread with El Brazil.
Hey, starting today is MLB Players Weekend, and by today I mean the day you're all listening to this. And for the first time ever, the MLB players will get to wear personalized caps that has their numbers on them. And they're interesting. I don't really get why they went with a serial killer vibe, but it was a choice.
The Braves and Reds are set to play a game next year at Bristol Motor Speedway in the center of a NASCAR track. Sports x sports collabs. Woo!
We should talk about going to that. I hate the Braves, but that is going to be insanely cool. Will Levis, who had a viral story last year where he said he uses mayo instead of creamer in his coffee, is going to be the face of an upcoming campaign for Hellman's Mayo. And let's just say the teaser definitely caught my attention.
Ah. The Titans are launching a new section of their stadium called the Mosh Pit. And this is serious fan business. You have to apply to gain access because they only want real, legitimate, and the biggest fans. So they're probably trying to create that very similar to like a soccer game atmosphere. I want my sports teams to do this. I want to apply. I want to sit there. I only want to sit with the most serious of serious fans.
Or just become an Eagles fan where every seat in the stadium's like this. The NFL preseason has started, which means most of us have now seen the new kickoff format. We're going to talk more about this as we get closer and closer to the start of the season, our predictions for it, but definitely check out this video that Mina Kimes did if you have questions about how the rules and how this logistically works, because it is a great summary of what in the world is going on.
Fantastic production of a video. Definitely recommend watching.
Thank you for listening to another sports show. Thank you to our co-creators, Nicole Katz and Briana Klein. Thank you to the four-legged executive producers and me, voiceover man. Make us one of your stars of the game by subscribing, liking the video, and turning on auto downloads. Make our day by leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice and a comment on YouTube. Attend the postgame on social media for exclusive daily content. We'll be back to review the playbook every week. See you next Tuesday.
Today was another sports show, but it's a Friday.